Scroll. This is the Creating Citizens Field Trip Series. My name is Rachel Lowe, and I'm the School Partnerships Manager here at the club, at the Commonwealth Club. The Commonwealth Club is a forum. We are here to let people speak. We're actually the oldest nonpartisan forum in the country, founded in 1903. That is older than Mickey Mouse. So the mouse was 15 years not yet born when people started having conversations with the Commonwealth Club. And our civics education initiative, Creating Citizens, right here, it focuses on empowering the next generation of active, informed citizens. And we are helping young people like you guys to challenge yourselves, learn more about civic issues, and to think about things differently than you might have had previously. So our goal today is that you leave all with the skills to talk to each other and to listen in a way that is a lot more effective than you have previously been taught. First things first, I have a tough question I think I'd like to start you with. Do you think that social media can be used for good?
Good.
You want to go?
Okay. So I think with this question, it's more productive to split it into two questions, really. Like when I hear that question, I hear two things. One is, can good things possibly come from social media? And the second one is social media specifically designed for good things to come from it? I think those two are very important, and rather than grouping them together. I would say for the former, off principle, anything, even if it's bad, can somehow be framed as good. I think the pandemic is a good example of that. Like, yes, it was a global pandemic, but you spent more time with your family, and it allowed people to consider what careers they wanted, but that's not a justification for saying that another one should happen. The answer to the second half of that question is, social media is not designed for good things to happen. They're more like a happenstance result of using them, but the actual business model prioritizes engagement. We all know that. Like, we love TikTok for that reason, right? But that delineation is really important because then it brings up a more productive question after that, which is, in what ways are we encouraging, in particular young people, to engage with technology, and what kinds, such that the good that they're hoping to produce actually comes about?
So I heard a lot in there. I'm also hearing that specifically social media isn't designed for good things to happen. Yeah. One of the points of my conversation here is we're going to be practicing dialogue. We're not going to be having a debate. But I've invited both Gabriella and Miles because I don't think that they fully agree on all of these issues. So Miles, do you agree with that? And what would you think?
Honestly, yeah, I do. So this time, yeah, I definitely do. Because I mean, coming at it from my perspective and like how I use social media, right? It's like 9 times out of 10, like I'm trying to just like connect with my friends, right? Like, which I feel like a lot of us are trying to do. But like you were saying, it's like the app isn't necessarily designed in that way anymore. You know what I'm saying? Like if you're going on social media, you're gonna be bombarded with information and stuff that like either isn't what you necessarily want to see or like doesn't necessarily serve that goal. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, for me right now, like I'm only using social media just to like just try to stay connected with my friends, right? Like I'm only DMing them funny videos, and then I'm kind of just trying to like get away from it. Like that's kind of like how I'm using the app right now because of what you're saying, because it's not necessarily a place that kind of like fosters community in the way that like I feel like it used to.
Can you say a little bit more about what it used to look like?
I mean, we
are slightly older than the people in our audience.
I mean, if you want like the big picture, I mean, like in the last like 20 years or so, I guess you can say, like that's kind of like when social media started to become like what it is today in a sense. Like that's kind of when you get your YouTubes and you start to get your Instagrams and, you know, your Facebooks and eventually your TikToks. And you kind of have, I think like the most crucial thing that happened was like, oh, like you can now like follow people, you know what I mean? You can now subscribe to a page. Like that is, you know, 20 years ago, like that was a new concept. And for a very long time, like that is how we were engaging with social media. And then at a point, you know, like it became about advertisers. So instead of it being about you connecting with your friends and you connecting to a community or like people that you may not know, you became a product for like the advertisers, if that makes sense.
Yeah, Gabriella, I see you nodding along with that. Yeah. What do you think then social media for good looks like? Is it like Miles demonstrated, that like touch and go? What do you think?
I think right now the menu seems so limited for social media for good. I think even what you're saying, kind of touch and go, especially if you've like grew up on these platforms. I had Instagram since I was 10, and then I spent like over 10 years, like chronically online. Like I load TikTok, Snapchat, Instagram, everything. And as the attention economy would get worse and advertisers would gouge your attention more, the good that you're trying to like search for gets smaller and smaller. And I think even the numbers recently are showing this. Like the industry, there's a counter industry to the attention economy, the digital detox, digital wellness industry, worth about $2.7 billion and projected to
Was that billion with a B?
billion.
$2.7 billion, the
like
digital detox
So that's like
industry?
the apps that you download to help with your screen time and the workshops you go to for like, digital wellness, all that kind of stuff. There's a counter industry growing there. But it puts us in a very precarious situation where you're forcing, in particular young people, to find and search so intensely, and Touch and Go is a good example of that. Like, so you're supposed to like go in and just look at that part and not the rest of it. It's sort of like it's a bit of a strange ask to kind of impose that on people without looking for some other more sustainable solution, which is a lot of the work that I do with abstinence and the people, like colleagues and the people on our team, is figuring out other ways for people to do exactly what you're saying, is how do we keep in touch with people, which both includes and does not include technology, in a way where we don't have to limit people to the kind of touch and go protocol, which as things get worse also gets harder and harder to do.
I was going to say, it's hard. Like,
it's harder and harder.
It's definitely harder, for sure, definitely.
When you say it's harder, that's part of what I'm wondering. It's like, when does social media, Miles, you commented that it didn't used to be this way. When does it become damaging? At what point does social media no longer become a good, or what makes it damaging? In your opinion, Miles, you want to start?
I think it's a few things. I mean, I think like we're at a point now, like we've kind of taken like the social aspect in some ways like out of it, right? Like we're all like, when you talk about like the advertisements, when you talk about like kind of, doom scrolling and just being on your phone, like the objective is to kind of keep you on your phone as long as possible, right? Like it's like to get as much out of you as possible, to get as much of your dollars as possible. When before, like, I'm literally just messaging a friend or sending a video to a friend, or like, did you see this? Or like subscribing to a YouTube channel of somebody that I admire and like want to learn from. And it's like, we've kind of skewed and gone away from that. I don't know like what that line looks like, but even what you were saying about like the counter of like, the counter of businesses like trying to get us off our phones, like even that, like I've gotten TikToks and things like that where that still feels like an advertisement. You know what I'm saying? They're like, oh, you can't focus, try this. And then like it's like the first like 30 seconds you're kind of into it, like, yeah, I do feel like that, I am on my phone, I can't focus. And then you're watching it and you're like, wait a minute, this person is just trying to sell me another app or another, business. So it's like, I think there's like, I don't know what the line looks like because it's so blurred, and like, it's like they've gotten so good at it that like you're already in it by the time that it's happened. Like it's already affected us, if that makes sense.
It's funny that you bring up the sort of seeing the ads for like, are you distracted and you can't do your homework? Well, download this app. If we're looking at the business model, right? Those companies that run these apps are actually, in a way, like are incentivized for you to also stay on the apps
Be
as well.
on the phone, yeah.
So it's no surprise as well that like these large tech companies, they like put out information about digital wellness and that kind of stuff because they want to keep you in that sort of narrow window, which is like keep the platform, but then just try an ever longer list of sort of harm reduction techniques and things like that. But you end up staying in that kind of cycle. So I appreciate that you pointed that out.
So far, we've gotten to this point of like social media is damaging. There's a lot of people advertising to you. And what I'm also hearing is there's a lot of manipulation at keeping you online. And I don't think that's a secret. Everybody has told you guys like, oh my gosh, the dark web, the internet, the patterns, they're coming for you, the algorithm. But does that mean that we're actually too misinformed to do things like vote in society?
I don't think it means that we're too misinformed. I was thinking about this question on the way over here and like trying to figure out a way, because it's like kind of like what you're saying. There's always like these different elements that kind of like come together to make a point. I think on some level, one point that stood out to me was like, I think on some level we're like over-informed. And I feel like that's like kind of intentional, right? Like you're being bombarded with information from kind of whether it's all sides of a political party or, you're getting like somebody trying to go viral for something or just trying to make money and profit from a brand or whatever. And it's like there's so much stuff that like when you're scrolling, you're just like endlessly scrolling. So it's like by the time you get to a voting poll, or by the time there's an issue that you care about, like you kind of don't know how to approach it. And I think that that's also by design. Like, I don't know if any of you are old enough to vote. I don't know what grade you guys are, but like when you go to a poll, like, and you vote on an issue, it's intentionally like worded in a way to confuse you sometimes, right? Like that's done by design. And I feel like, you know, the way that kind of translates to like online and social media in the same way, if that makes sense, where it's just like, I'm going to throw all this stuff at you, whether it's jargon that you don't understand, whether it's stuff that I think you might like, stuff that you think you don't like. So by the time there's an issue that comes up that you're like, oh, this is something that's relevant to me, you don't necessarily like know what to do with it. You know what I'm saying? It's like, you can look at an issue like ICE being in Minnesota or something like that, right? And it's like, you seeing stuff and you're like, oh wow, this is bad, you know, but then it's like you hear counter information to that where it's like, oh no, wait, this is actually what's happening. And you're kind of like, the intent, whether you believe it or not, is to overwhelm you, to confuse you, and to like throw you off the scent, if that makes sense. So I feel like you're being overwhelmed with information.
Yeah, I think the point you brought up was really important with a lot of the strategies, and maybe if you guys have heard that, like, to counter misinformation, so things like, you know, stop and pause and think and do a little more research. And of course, that's not to say that young people don't have the agency to do that, right? And we definitely need to encourage people of all generations to do those things. The problem is the actual mediums in which you're consuming the information you need to stop and pause and think about. The actual mediums do not incentivize
When you say
for you
mediums,
to do that.
what do you mean by
mediums? Like TikTok, Instagram.
Oh, the apps themselves?
The actual apps themselves, yeah.
Okay.
And like a majority of Gen Z, for example, get their news from these platforms. TikTok is a pretty big contender in that. Like there's have you guys heard of the SIFT method? SIFT. It's like a method for you to actually like take a moment, pause, and contextualize information, trace its roots so that you are not then misinformed from it. The S stands for stop. But what is doom scrolling is that you don't stop. So that very first step is already we already kind of pull the rug out from underneath that one, right? Like you can say all day, like stop and do this, but the actual product is encouraging the opposite. It's a very high standard, a very high expectation that is imposed on well, honestly, everyday users, if that's what we're normalizing for people to be using to get their news from.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess my question then goes to Miles. You're a content creator. Mm-hmm. How do you see your job fitting into these systems that, you know, you're one stream of information amongst all of the other streams of information? So how does that fit into your life?
I mean, it's been interesting to navigate because I've been making content for, I guess, going on like 10 years. But I think my background kind of comes from journalism. So it's like I kind of like naturally was like educated on kind of like the SIFT method and kind of like how to stop and how to like, you know, whether it's doing my own research or the own rigor that kind of comes with like slowing down to like, you know, make sure I take my time. And I also think like the space that I was working in, like I am a content creator, but I am working within like the education space. Like so much of the videos that I've made have been about like doing the very things that we're talking about. Even if I'm talking about a topic that's not inherently related to tech, you know, like I've done episodes on like, you know, beavers and how they affect climate, you know what I'm saying? And it's like, I'm still like telling you like, hey, this is the research that I did, you know what I'm saying? These are the articles that I read. These are the experts that I talked to. And this is the information that I got out of it. And this is how it's informed what I'm telling you in the video. Then I tell you, and then at the end, we would always ask, you know, like, what do you think? Like that was kind of like the overall encompassing point of the entire show, was being like, okay, now what do you as the viewer, as the young person, that now that I've given you the tools or like shown you how I, you know, use my own tools to get my own information, how are you gonna figure it out, kind of, you know? So that's how it's helped me. But I mean now, especially because like that show doesn't exist anymore, it's been sunset. So I haven't done that in like 2 years. So it's like now I'm in a position where I'm like, I'm, you know, making my own content for myself, or like, you know, trying to, whether it's collaborate with brands or something like that. And it's like, oh wait, I still want to make sure that I still have that rigor. I still want to make sure that I'm going through those steps to make sure that, you know, I'm not, you know, lying or manipulating people, you know? So it's tough. Like I still haven't figured it out. And I'm still
hearing
working
the
through
onus
it.
is on you. Like the job is yours then.
Oh, yeah,
in
for
order
sure.
to make sure that you're producing good content.
For sure. It's my responsibility, absolutely. Because it's like, if I didn't have the journalism background, I probably wouldn't have the consciousness. Like I wouldn't have the conscience to do it. Like I have friends that make content, and like we've seen people that make content where it's just like, I want to go viral or I want to post whatever. And like kind of to what you were saying earlier, it's like, yeah, like the algorithm.
You won't shout out the Pick Me creators on stage?
Absolutely not. Absolutely
Okay.
not. But it's like, the algorithm almost sometimes like feeds into that negativity. You know what I'm saying? So it's like if you were like brought up with it in that way, then you don't even necessarily think of it that way.
Well, and Gabriella, your response then, as the founder of a Quit This movement,
Right.
Welcome in, everybody. Your response was to walk away entirely. I know you have a flip phone.
It's not a flip phone. I have it
It's
in my
not
pocket.
quite a flip phone?
In my pocket? Yes, I do have it in my pocket. They're called dumb phones, which I don't
dumb phone.
like.
A
that.
dumb phone.
I don't like that term. There's
Me
something
neither.
dumb about the phone. But the point being that like, the status quo is that everyone has a smartphone, right? That's kind of like when someone says they have a phone, you can pretty much assume that they have a smartphone.
Right.
So part of what I encourage people to do is break that status quo. What is it outside of, like, smartphones are very new technologies, right? Like all in the history of technological innovation. So it doesn't seem to make sense because it doesn't uphold in other areas of society where we only have like one thing. People drive all different types of cars, different types of transportation, different types of clothes. For some reason, there's like a status quo, like there's like a monopoly on phones that smartphones have. So in my own personal lifestyle, I switched to this phone. There's like many different types you can use. And then it helps me just honestly focus. It helps me focus not in the sense of like on a specific individual task, but it also just gives me the peace of mind of knowing that I don't have to contend with one of these companies pushed out some AI update that I didn't know about, and then I didn't have time to read about what it was, and you're kind of in this endless chase. So it gave me a peace of mind that when I changed my phone.
So I see you nodding, Miles. Is it your next step is to get a dumb phone then?
I don't know if I can make that commitment. I think that I do like the idea of it, and it's like I have been trying to figure out my own ways to get off social media. But I was thinking about it more so in the sense of like you said, like smartphones kind of have this monopoly, and I think that kind of goes to what we were saying earlier in the conversation about how 20 years ago like social media wasn't like this, and like kind of being on the internet in general wasn't like this. Our lives weren't necessarily like this, and it's like there is like a hard line in that like 2005 to like 2008 range where it's like, oh, now we have social media that's more comparable to what we have today. We have the first kind of smartphones coming about, and then like you kind of just see like the snowball effect from there, kind of like taking us down that hill.
So, Gabriella, what would you ask young people to do, as you said, in a smartphone-loving world? And I remember going to college and getting that was my first smartphone, I promise. I'm not even 30 yet, you guys. This is how fast the world has changed. And getting my first smartphone and immediately being like, wow, these professors need me to respond to them immediately with my email app, or how am I going to get somewhere without Google Maps? Or how am I even going to take advantage of what my friends are doing? So what is your advice with your dumb phone?
Well, so the thing about smartphones and any kind of new technologies is they solve certain problems, but the trade-off of that is they create new dependencies as well. And so
What do you mean by dependency?
Dependency. So I think a lot of times we talk about social media addiction, right? Like that is one category. But we also have dependencies that they're not that you wouldn't categorize them as addictions. For example, my friend needs his Apple Watch to get into his Tesla. Silicon Valley moment, right? But like, right? He's not addicted.
Does he forget to charge his key to his car?
I don't think he even uses it. I don't think he carries it around. It's too physical of a key. Everything's cloud for him. But anyways, the point being that like, he's not addicted to opening his car like with his Apple Watch. He's dependent on it because then he otherwise can't get into his car. I think it's important to separate those out. So I think having this phone, for example, encourages me to have fewer dependencies, or if I have any times that I need to use technology, quote unquote, as a tool, it gives me the pause to figure out if I really need to do it that way. So for concretely, this phone I don't currently use this phone for maps. I believe it has it, but I don't use it on here. But if I needed to use maps to get somewhere, if it's a brand new place that I am completely unfamiliar with and I have to be there at a specific time for like an event like this, I'll use maps. Mm-hmm. But as time has gone on, as I've had this phone, I've become more trusting of myself that I just can figure it out, and I'll look it up ahead of time and then go and add just 5-10 minutes on my agenda. So in case I get a little lost, then I can stop someone and ask for directions. But the trade-off of that was an inconvenience in the beginning, which I ended up realizing wasn't even a trade-off really. Like the inconvenience itself is what made the experience just difficult enough that I started to trust myself more. My sense of direction got better as well. Like, I think when we make our lives very convenient through things like smartphones, we can trade off the other skills that we might have otherwise had. And
it's making me a little emotional, because I'm remembering back when I used to live in another place and I didn't have a place where I could Google anything, and I had to ask a lot of strangers for help, and I had to rely on myself in a way that I kind of forgot about. Miles, do you have any similar experience?
I mean, yeah. I mean, it made me think about randomly, where was I? I forget where I was, but there was somebody that like was trying to do something, and he like was lost. So he was like, hey, can you like, he didn't know where he was going. And he wasn't talking to me, but I was like overhearing the conversation, and like what you were saying, right? Like trusting yourself and all this other stuff. And like how we all are kind of dependent on it. And like how I feel like another step of like us all kind of being dependent on the phones is like going into kind of like the more, I don't want to be like antisocial, but like, I just remember like somebody telling him like, look it up on your phone. And like, I was just like, huh, you could, and where he was going was literally like right up the street. So it was like, you could have just, you could have, even if you just pointed that way, you know what I mean? That would have been more of you and more engaging than you kind of just like, brushing him off. It just kind of makes me think of that. And then I also thought like a couple years ago, I remember I was helping my mom clean out her house, and like we found like the old, it was like an old binder full of like printed out maps of like when we like would take like family trips and stuff like that before you could, before you would Google map it on your phone. She like literally had like papers of like how to get to Disneyland and like how to get to like Los Angeles and stuff like that. And we like had like a really good laugh about that. Like, cause it was like
Teachers might remember MapQuest.
Yeah, that's what it was. It was MapQuest, and it was like a pretty like thick binder. And I was like, damn, like we don't use this at all anymore. Like it's all in your pocket. So it's like, yeah. But I think that the thing that you're saying about like people being dependent on it like is like really, really strong, because it's like, I couldn't get on BART today if I didn't have my phone because I put my clipper on my phone. You know what I'm saying? So it's like
you almost didn't get here.
I almost didn't get here because
right?
You know
because
what I'm saying?
That other BART reason.
Exactly. But like, they've done and it's like everybody's kind of feeding into that now because they know that we're dependent on the phone.
Yeah.
So I want to touch back on something you said that kind of interested me. You said that it makes people a little antisocial.
Yeah.
Look it up on your phone. Why don't you know how to do it?
Right.
And do you think that's making us be more independent than we should be as a community?
I don't know if independent's the word that I would use. In that scenario, she was just being mean. Like she was just genuinely like not being helpful, like intentionally not being helpful. I do think that like, yeah, it kind of like makes us like siloed, you know what I mean? Because like, yeah, we have our community, like, yeah, you guys have your classmates or whoever, like you might be like in a room with all day, but like a lot of our community and a lot of the stuff that we're doing is on our phone. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, it pushes us away from like the actual real life community in a way that like it just hasn't before.
Do you agree, Gabriella?
Yeah, echoing what you're saying, Miles, I think independence is not the word I would necessarily use. I think, but let's say for a second that we do use the word independence.
Right.
Yeah. Then you go about your day. There's this idea, there's like almost like a social status that if you were the most independent in going through your day, that's somehow necessarily better. But what we're realizing once this attention economy has gotten so bad and we are so independent, we've become alone, that maybe what we used to do, which is as we would go through our day and depend, and I use a word like as it is, depend on people throughout your day, that is actually what creates the sense of community that you were trying to circumvent by then going on social media. So you've then kind of skipped you've ended up selling your attention to not get the thing that you were thinking you were selling it for, and so it ends up becoming a sort of a mess, right? But then I think, for example, me having this phone, it forces me at times to have to depend on people in various degrees. Strangers, for example, I had to ask for directions. Or I called you this morning because I got a little lost, to have to ask for directions how to get somewhere. Or just various other things too. I mean, when you have so many parts of your day kind of automated, it naturally will push out other people, because how society used to function before these devices was that there was someone who would do that for you. I think BART would be a good example, right? Like there used to be a time when everyone had to buy the ticket from someone who was behind a counter. Now you can everything's kind of automated now, and then it just keeps going until you can, I think it was as of 2023, they figured out you can go through your whole cycle of like the average adult, something like that. I have to verify this information, guys. Go through your whole day without speaking to a human being, basically, because so many
feel
things
like
have
I've
reached the
experienced
level
that since
of automation.
COVID.
Definitely during COVID.
For
That's the thing's interesting, though. It's introduced when it was necessary, when you had to keep a distance, and then now that we're supposed to be, like, we're decreasing the distance from each other, we've maintained that tie or that feeling of convenience superiority, and then we don't want to let go of what was introduced and when we needed it, right? When you wanted to go to the store and then you needed to pay for something, it helped at the time, but then it has stayed. And so then the question is, how do we revert?
Technology has overstayed its welcome in this case.
Basically, yeah.
So what is the perfect amount of technology? Because the Amish have an answer, and it's very different than our answer.
I mean, I don't know if there's a perfect amount. I feel like the goalpost is always gonna keep moving. You know what I'm saying? It's like, yes, I like being on social media. Yes, I like being on my phone. Yes, I like being able to connect with my friends and laugh at videos. And then, like, next thing you know, like, you've been doom scrolling for a couple hours, and it's like, wait, that's not good. And then it's like, well, we've been talking about, like, wait, I'm dependent on my phone. I literally can't function without it. I don't know how to read a map. I don't know how to, you know, if my friend, it's so bad that sometimes, like,
This is a bummer.
Yeah, it is. This is the bummer part of the conversation. It's like to the point now, like, where, you know, when people call me sometimes, like, I'm so surprised that they call me as opposed to, like, texting me or something else that, like, I sound rude on the phone. You know what I mean? It's like they'll call me and I'm like, hello? Like, what is this? You know? And it's like, oh, I'm just checking. I just want to see how you doing. For what? You know what I mean? Like, why? You know? Yeah, it's like, I feel like, you know, I don't know what that balance is, and I feel like we're always going to be kind of like seeking it out. But I think a big part of it is, like, you know, getting outside. Getting outside, finding, like, being in, like, you have to be in real life community with people and, like, with the things that you're interested in. It can't just be on your phone. I do think that there's, like, a healthy amount where it's like, yeah, I've learned a lot about, like, the things that I'm interested in industries and, you know, people and just things, hobbies, whatever, just from my phone. But, like, there has to come to a point where, like, I have to do it in some way in real life, whether that's, like, you know, meeting up somewhere or talking to a real person or whatever. So, but like I said, I think that goalpost is going to be consistently moving for a long time.
So and instead of just passing that next question, on that note of building community, we live in a democracy, and democracies are kind of, the point is community, and that the community is the one that's saying what we should be doing, that we're leading ourselves. So I had kind of asked this question before of, are we too misinformed to vote? But my question now is, how much technology helps us be better citizens? And what technology is actually making us really bad citizens in this country, or, you know, aspiring adults in a society?
Yes, I think there's a general subset of general skills, like this project at the Commonwealth Club helps to.
We did not pay her to say that.
I can verify this. Things like open, expressive dialogue, critical thinking, a certain level of, like, basic, you know, reading comprehension and arithmetic, these kinds of things. So technology that helps insofar as we're able to achieve those things. The issue is that a lot of the mediums that we use today, like social media included, is sort of marketed to help with those things, and in ways, if it's the only thing that we're using versus not having these at all, not having any form of education, which, I mean, people need to be going to school, but it can seem like a very stark situation to be in, which is like we either, like, pick to keep the kids on social media and they have to deal with all of the harms, or they get nothing else at all. But the thing is, that's not true, though. You know, if so much of the internet is not actually social media. Like, I think, like, for example, me now, I don't use social media. This is the phone that I use primarily now.
You're telling me there's other things on the internet besides TikTok?
Right, exactly. And so then, but for me to get the information that I get, I use sort of static websites and things like that that are not designed to capture my attention. So to answer a little bit of the question right before this one, like, what is the perfect amount of technology? I think, like, with abstinence, for example, or the sort of the claim of what to do is, if the technology is designed to be addicting. So if it's supposed to specifically designed to hook you, make you lose track of time, the way that you feel when you use TikTok, that's a good line, good bucket to roughly put platforms into or technologies into. Of course, it's not a perfect line, right? Like, there are websites that are kind of like 1 foot in, 1 foot out. I think news websites are kind of a good example of that. But for the time being, and you're right, the goalpost will move, I think this is a good line to be drawing.
I want to challenge a little bit on that, though. I've seen it, and I've had friends who have actually gotten really active on TikTok and have started whole movements and like protest movements and really good acts of like civic engagement through those apps. Is it worth, okay, if that app's addictive, then we can't use it for good causes? Do you think that's fair?
So I think kind of going back to the original answer, that the very first question you asked, like, can social media be used for good? I think that's an example of a system that kind of creates winners and losers. Like, there will be people who are, for whatever purpose, like more agentic in the way that they want to use these platforms. But
What
however,
do you mean when you say agentic? Sorry.
like, and this is a particular issue with the contentious debate with kids these days, like kids and how much we should allow them to use these products. So minors, anyone under the age of 18, let's say, that they're still going through very sensitive developmental periods in which they have not yet developed to the full sufficient capacity, the agency in which to monitor, quote unquote, sufficiently these platforms. I don't think that line is as reachable as most people think it is, but like you were saying, there will be people who will use the system in some way to produce some amount of good. I think the question becomes then the output that they're putting out, what is it imposing on the people who then do see it, right? There'll be people who like see a reel that one of your friends makes and then they want to get involved. Yeah. But the actual system in which they're putting that out is not incentivized for that. And to kind of go back to my original, like the first question you asked, like there's a separation between what people actually are able to do if they commit themselves to enough agency, enough clear-headedness, versus what you can kind of expect the mass population to do, which is what most people do on social media, which is not necessarily see that as a call to action in the real world, but rather slacktivism or Slacktivism.
That's a new word for me. Can you say what slacktivism is?
It's like the very, very low effort activism that is really popular in social media.
Armchair activism.
Armchair activism, where you kind of like just look at it and then you like repost it, and you have not even considered what it was, or you saw someone else post it, and so because of the social reciprocity that's encouraged on these platforms, you then post it, and then a bunch of information gets out and no one has really understood what it was. The thing is though about misinformation is that information could be like objectively empirically correct, but because you've pushed it out into context that where you're not encouraging the people who receive it to then contextualize it, it then kind of becomes misinformation in a way, because then you would just not be incentivized to actually check that information.
And Miles, I wanted to give you a chance also to respond.
No, everything you just said was kind of like the point that I was going to make. I was like, yeah, but like it gets to a point where like I can literally just repost, keep swiping, and then like go about my day. You know what I mean?
Do you think people are better or worse for having knowledge of those things?
It depends, because it's like you can't even say that like they got the knowledge sometimes. Like if sometimes you're literally just, you see it, you hear like the first 5 seconds, like, yes, I think I'm going to agree with this, repost, swipe, or I'm going to share it, swipe it, without necessarily engaging with it. And I think that on some level, like all of us are kind of guilty of that. I mean, kind of coming from my background.
I don't know what you're talking about. I've never done anything like that, and no one's going to ever look at my social media.
Because like I feel like there was a few things you were saying that like kind of had things rolling in my brain where it's like, you know, so many times it's like, from my journalism background, it's like I'm always like, read more than the headline. But then like I was saying, like, you know, the internet has adapted in such a way, whether it's with AI or with social media, that like, you know, now people aren't, you were saying that, you know, you use like static websites, like the rate at which people are like actually clicking on a web page is like plummeting. Yeah, like it's like plummeting. Like people are literally just reading, like they'll Google something, read with the first thing that they see, which is now the little AI overview, right, and then that's it. You know what I'm saying? So I think like the same thing is applying to like what you're saying about like, you know, your friend kind of like trying to start like civic engagement. It's like people are still kind of like, oh, yes, that seems nice. And then they, you know, like it and like kind of just keep it pushing. So I think that, yeah.
Awesome. Well, I mean, not awesome, frankly.
Not awesome,
I guess then what my question is, in a democracy, right? We're talking about creating citizens and civic engagement. What can we do as a civic community to combat this? Do you think it is up to the individual to buy a dumb phone, or should we as a nation regulate it? What do you think?
I mean, I feel like anytime you get to regulation and like by the time you get there, it's like already too late. Like, I don't want to sound like pessimistic, but like I keep seeing advertisements for like Instagram teens, and it's like, you've already, yeah, there's like a whole separate thing of like
I
forget.
didn't know this was real.
Yeah, Instagram teens. I forget what it is, but I keep seeing like
accounts.
Yeah, like teen focused accounts to like try to protect young people. But the thing is, it's like it's been 10 plus years of them not being protected. You know what I mean? So in some ways, like the damage is done. So by the time I feel like a lot of times by the time we actually get to regulation, there's so much combating against that. By the time that there is any, that there's already probably like, you know, a generation's worth of people that have been damaged or have been like affected by it.
Yeah, I think echoing what you're saying, this kind of goes into a lot of what we talk about like at abstinence, when we, you know, sort of taking this personal agency that you have to do what you can on your end, right? Like any social change, it's always going to be a combination of what the grassroots people do and then what we are able to get the government to do. It's always some combination of both. There's been a long history of trying to regulate social media companies, to which it's been largely unsuccessful. Well, things are actually changing this year, but we'll see how it goes. But you don't have to wait until someone else, and there's a general principle of life, like you don't have to wait until someone else comes to save you. I think, like, for example, for me, I spent so much of my adolescence on these platforms, and if I decided that I wanted to wait until someone else would come in strong-handed enough to do what I ended up needing to do for myself, I'd be waiting a really long time. Yeah. And so I would definitely call anyone right now, in particular this lovely audience, to make this decision for yourself. I mean, don't wait for your parents to impose rules on you or for your schools to do anything. For like, those things don't get me wrong, we do have to put our hands in those situations as well and get them to make changes. But as a general principle rule of life, like, don't wait for other people to save you, you know?
But does that mean that we shouldn't do it at all? Like, should we, when that ballot comes in and says regulate, should we check yes or no if we are given the option?
Yeah, I think it's it's for like a definite yeah. But I think that, like, you know, what you're kind of saying is like we have to be like active participants in our own lives. And I think that, like, you know, where we're at with phones, technology, and social media, it's like they prey on us not being that. Like they understand on us.
What do you mean? Like they prey on us not being that?
What I mean by they prey on us not being active, it's like they know, like I've been saying, like they know that there's a subset of people that are just gonna keep scrolling. You know what I mean? They got rid of pages for a reason, right? Like before you'd get to the bottom of a website and you'd have to click to go to page 2, and now like we've had the infinity scroll for however many years, you know what I'm saying? So it's like they understand that, like, oh, if I just keep you here, you know, I don't want to say like dumb you down, but it's like I can kind of wear you down, you know what I'm saying? Like that's kind of what's happening. So it's like what you're saying, it's like we have to kind of combat that and fight against that and kind of be like, oh wait, you kind of gotta wake up, you know what I mean? In a sense of like, I have to be more active, I have to be more attentive to like what I'm consuming, how I'm interacting with it, how it affects me, how it impacts me, and how I'm choosing to like navigate how I like relay that information to my community or to the other people around me.
Yeah.
And Gabriella, like, if that regulation comes up, do we yes, or is it really just on us?
No, it's definitely the majority of the fault for the situation should be on the companies. Yeah. Definitively, especially for the fact that increasingly younger, the age in which children are accessing these platforms is getting younger and younger. You cannot expect a 7-year-old to make that conscious decision and understand the entire situation. What is the digital economy? What is it? For a 7, no. So that's something that social media companies need to be held accountable for.
That's an episode of Bluey I missed.
Yes, definitely. But off of that, I mean, it is then the parents' responsibility for what they're, you know, in part, what their 7-year-olds access. But it should be that the companies are not allowed to put out those products to children. But because the actual logistics of holding the companies accountable has shown to be demonstrably difficult to do, I would not encourage anyone to wait, because like you were saying earlier, the goalpost keeps moving. Like things are just getting worse, especially now with the AI revolution. And there was a time we didn't have AI slop, if you remember these days, right? Like, and who's to be able to say like what's going to come? And so I think making those personal choices is a form of the agency and civic participation, because how you handle your attention impacts the people around you as well. How you handle your attention helps you commit yourself more dutifully to understanding whatever it is that you do read online, such that when you have a conversation with a friend or go to the voting booth, you're able to make a more what they call correct voting decision, like actually vote within your self-interest and how it might actually benefit your community. Yeah.
Got it. Well, I think we're coming to the end of the time, though. I think I would have a lot more questions if we could keep talking, because I really feel like we could have more conversation about regulation and what it is that we as people could really do.
Absolutely.
So I have a lot to think about going forward and a lot of questions, but I want to thank you both, Gabriella and Miles. Can we give them a quick hand? And because of the mic issues earlier, I was obviously discombobulated. For those of you from Ignacio Valley, thank you for joining us. You don't know what I'm talking about, so you didn't see my embarrassment. We do have a Q&A session for these two. So if you have some questions, my lovely colleague Nesreen over here has a mic box. You do get to throw this mic box.
Don't hit each other, huh? Okay.
Please.
If anybody has to get assaulted and go to the hospital, I don't have insurance to
it's
cover that, so please
An
don't.
actual.
Mic box, I see.
Yeah, and there's no paperwork for the teachers. So if you have a question, please. Go ahead, say your name, what school you're from, and who your question is for.
I'm Yanina. I'm from Ignacio Valley. And I know we were late, so I'm kind of confused, but that's fine. I was wondering why you chose to use the term democracy, especially with everything that's going on politically. Why? Since many people could debate that we are losing our democracy, especially with the current events regarding freedom for each people.
Is that for me?
Person. Yeah.
I think I use the term democracy in terms of that's the voting system we still have, and I don't personally think it's helpful to think about the changing structure as if it's already changed. So I use term democracy because that's the United States system of governance. And if that's going to change, that's going to change in the future. But right now, that's what our current system, and that's what civic engagement is about, is enabling and keeping that.
Okay, thank you.
Do you guys have any other responses about the term democracy in these times?
No, I think it's an important nuance to say that, to put that we are in changing times, because also using the word democracy also keeps it in the conversation as well, so such that we're still talking about what the ideal version of the situation would be. But of course, you can do those too. You can both completely acknowledge these are changing times and also say that everything that we're talking about is towards the goal of democracy. So I think the way you went about it was appropriate for sure.
No, yeah, I agree. Definitely. Like the way, like what we're talking about and like what, like we hope the outcome of this to be definitely like would be more democracy.
We currently see democracy as a good thing, and we want more of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool, thank you. And go ahead and pass it to the next question.
Yep. Yo, hello. I'm from Wash. My name is Mehdi. And the question is for the guy in the middle. What made you want to start content creation?
So my background's in journalism. So I started doing journalism when I was like 14 or 15. And that was just like, I found a program that kind of like encompassed like all the stuff that I liked. It was like you said in the beginning, YR Media. So it was like journalism production, music production, video production, and I kind of did like a nonprofit like school where I was like learning all of those things. And I was like, yeah, I want to keep doing this. So as my career just kind of like kept progressing, content creation just kind of was like a natural progression of that. And then I started working at KQED in 2017, I believe. And it was like the perfect combination of everything that I had been doing up until that point. So it was like, oh, I get to do kind of like the rigor and like the research and kind of like fact-based, work of journalism, but I also get to like host and like be in front of the camera and kind of like show my personality. And then like that kind of like ballooned into what it was, and I've been doing it kind of ever since. But yeah,
Thank you.
I love it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice.
I have a
Nice.
question about when you were saying that there are going to be like some possible like legal changes made when it comes to social media, and also like what do you think can realistically be achieved by like making more regulations in a way that doesn't like make people turn away from it?
Good question.
Yeah, so Mark Zuckerberg is on trial right now.
He's on, what is he on trial for?
On trial for. So basically, there's like a bunch of lawsuits for harms against minors on these platforms, and asking him sort of the essential question, like, is your product designed to addict children and that kind of stuff? And so there's a history of this with him, but he testified. And so there's a lot of states that are also contending with these issues as well, California included. Also countries around the world that are trying to figure out ways to kind of corral in these companies. Europe is leading a lot of that charge. Australia passed their first,
Yeah, we'll be talking about that a little bit later.
Yeah, I went to Australia for that week that the actual ban went through, and sort of talked to a bunch of different people, all different types of people in Australian society, to ask them about what they thought of this legislation. It was from that experience that I kind of first started to really bake what a federal ban might look like. So to answer the second half of your question, like so many people in Australian society are in support of the ban that has gone through. And when we talked to younger people who were suspicious about it, their hesitations were really about whether or not it would be effective, but they weren't actually against the actual idea of banning social media, because the actual ban would not keep, say, a 12-year-old from the internet altogether. It would specifically make it that if they were on YouTube, for example, they couldn't make an account because the account would feed you a greater concentration of addictive features, for example. So I really do think that there's room for conversation and ultimately a federal ban for social media for minors under the age of 18 in the United States. And right now that's with the trial that's going through right now, it's not as a hot topic of a thing to say. But I think it'll be something, especially now with AI, like it'll be something that we will definitely contend with more seriously in courts, but also on the cultural level as well. Like when I went to Australia, one of the biggest things that I learned from that trip was that one of the biggest benefits of the ban that was going through was actually the cultural change that was going to happen. This idea that the childhood is supposed to be a certain set of things and not supposed to be a certain set of other things. Like you're not supposed to be taken advantage of by tech companies when you're 10. That is the statement that the ban was making by being enacted. It gave parents also the permission to say to their 12-year-old asking for, hey, can I make a Snapchat? It's illegal, right? They can just then say that, right? But up to that point, his parents had to kind of like dance around it or like put it on the school or put it on, be like, oh, or just feel like they just had to wait until society changed enough. And it's a very helpless position to be in. So I really think that is what's on the docket for a lot of people, but it's a lot of people like you guys to talk about what that would mean and how you might receive it. Yeah,
For sure.
Oh, my name is Samar and I'm from George Washington. And my question is how do you guys think social media has impacted mental health?
I think it's greatly impacted mental health. Isn't one of the, I'd have to do my own digging on this, but I feel like one of the things that Mark Zuckerberg was on trial for was like being aware of like how social media, like I think it was specifically like was impacting like young girls, and like basically like he knew, like basically the platform and the people that worked there like knew that like, you know, it was making young ladies like insecure, whether it was about like their bodies or self-images, and was like feeding them content to kind of reinforce that. So it's like, that is not a good thing. You know what I'm saying? Like that is very bad. So I think that social media has had like a great impact on mental health in that regard, in terms of just like how people like can see themselves. And then also just like, I think when we talk about doom scrolling and being on there endlessly and just the infinite scroll, the way that it kind of, I don't have the knowledge of like what it does to the brain specifically to give you the language, but like we have data, we have enough information to know that it kind of like, that it definitely does impact you, and it definitely can and will hurt you if you are using it consistently and too much, because the algorithm will reinforce whatever negative thing, you know, it feels you don't want, well, I don't want to say don't want to see, but it'll reinforce that thing that you don't necessarily want to see and kind of keep feeding it to you. Like we know that it does that, and he's on trial for it right now. So yeah, definitely impacts your mental health.
Yeah. Pretty much covered a lot of it. But yeah, there's substantial evidence that's linking increased use of social media to body image disorders, attention deficit, ADHD-like symptoms, sleep problems, a whole host of other different things. As you can imagine, just think for a second, like you stay up really late at night on TikTok. How are you going to feel the next day when you didn't sleep? You were like watching crazy stuff right before you immediately hit the sheets, and then you fell asleep, and then you woke up and immediately checked your phone again. You can understand, kind of feel like how that would dysregulate the way that your day would go. And so I think one of the other things that was interesting to me was I think a lot of the companies in particular will kind of push out a narrative that these platforms are, but they're really good for in particular marginalized groups. And that is 100% something that should be a concern as we're figuring out how to actually regulate these companies. But there is a recent survey when they surveyed actually queer teens, for example, and asking them like about their experiences with social media, and they're finding that these groups actually are reporting much higher levels of dissatisfaction with the platforms than their non-queer counterparts, for example. Like it was like almost twice as likely queer teens were almost twice as likely to say that they would have been better off without Instagram or TikTok, and then almost 3 times as likely for Snapchat. So a lot of this idea of but it provides connection for these groups because of the particular way these platforms are designed is not retaining the truth of the old internet, which was allowing a lot of groups that were otherwise separated with each other.
I remember that. Like there were great groups for queer people online at the time, but apparently now it's not the way it used to be.
There's higher levels. They experience much higher levels of things like cyberbullying, targeted harassment, things that are an exacerbation of what exists already in the real world. And 84% of queer adults don't report that they don't think that there's sufficient protection on these platforms for them. And so it's like this, a lot of the original kind of narrative that had supported sort of endless kind of digital rights use of this is kind of starting to break down really, especially as things like the trial that is going on is revealing through, Meta internal files, TikTok internal files, independent research that's being conducted, that a lot of these narratives or intuitions I think that we have about these platforms are not as true as we think that they are.
And I know that I can add on to that. I saw a statistic right before as I was preparing for this that if you use social media for more than 5 hours a day, you are twice as likely to have symptoms of depression, anxiety, and like 5 hours really starts to hit your mental health of any social media.
Yeah. The average for American teenagers is just under 5.
Is 4.8. 4.8 hours. Yeah, everyone's flirting with mental disorder at this point, I think.
Yeah, so that's like almost a full-time job a week, right? Because you obviously don't have Saturday and Sunday off from social media, right? You probably use it more. But the other thing is in terms of considering how you relate to social media is also it takes away your even ability to think and pause about what you'd be doing with the time otherwise, especially if you've been using these technologies since you were really young and it has become a moderator of your day. It makes sense that it's hard to imagine what you'd be doing otherwise. And I was like that when I was like 15, 16, and I'm kind of first exploring what are the ways I can get offline. It was hard for me to imagine other than imagining a 1950s movie where people just roamed and walked along the beach. It was hard for me to imagine what exactly am I going to do with the 3 hours when school ends at 3, but dinner isn't until 6. What am I supposed to do if I'm not online? You have to reimagine stuff that you hadn't yet done. And so
the answer can't be homework at all.
That's the thing is I would then just fill it with more homework and more work, and then that wasn't getting to the goal of doing work that was joyful and creative necessarily, because then you would just fill with more work. And then as an adult, I still have that habit, to be honest. Now that I have more time from being offline, I still can gravitate from those initial habits as a kid to then just fill it with more things that didn't necessarily bring me this elevated sense of humanity.
I'm gonna just ask for one more, I think, and we're getting close to the end of our time. So sorry to interrupt. I think we have time for 2 more questions. I saw you up front here. Can I get the box tossed towards the front and hopefully no concussions on the way? Okay, close. Good job.
Good throw. My name is Christian, and I'm from Ignacio Valley High School. My question is for Miles. You said that ever since COVID, people haven't socialized as much or haven't been able to recover from the antisocial aspects from it. Do you believe that AI apps and AI only AI implementation has been really affected by it? It's been if COVID has never happened, AI wouldn't have been as popular or as pushed onto the apps?
That's a really good question. I do think that maybe the way that we interact with AI probably would be maybe different, but there's really no way to tell because they're putting it everywhere. It's literally, you can't, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's on Google, it's on TikTok, it's on Instagram, it's literally every single, and it's like, it's to the point where like, I was looking for a job recently and my grandfather was like, just put your resume in ChatGPT. And it was like, all right, bro, like, you know what I'm saying? So it's like, it's literally all over the place. So I don't know if I can really speak to say that like, oh, it would be different. But maybe it wouldn't have been, because we would still be on some level a little more social and a little more willing to interact with each other. But like, I think AI, to like kind of answer your question, I do think that like AI and the folks behind it kind of were preying on the fact that we were siloed, right? So it's like, you even see it when you see promotions for ChatGPT, it's like they're kind of promoting it as like your friend, right? They're promoting it as like a companion, or like, oh, we will solve these problems for you that you would normally just like, you know, whether it's research or like doing your own kind of work, or like just being in community with somebody and asking your friend for help. Now it's just like, oh, I'm going to ask the AI. I'm going to ask ChatGPT. I'm going to ask the robot to tell me what's going to happen. So I do think that in some ways that AI may have been like preying on us and like what happened to us as a society as a result of COVID. But I don't know like what would have happened if COVID never happened. I think that that's like too big of a question. But I do think that AI definitely like saw that vulnerability and like they pounced on that opportunity for sure.
And one more question. I see some hands. Okay, I think we could probably fit 2 in if we go fast. So we'll do 1 and then 2 with your hand up. Okay.
Okay, so my name is Elmira. I'm from Washington High School. My English is not perfect,
sure,
but I will try. Yes, so my question is like, how much screen time do you recommend, and how you see this like balance between like real life and social media? Because I feel that, like, for example, I don't have any social media, and at one side, I try to be like more active in real life, like to do sport and to study, but sometimes I feel that I'm like lose connection even with my sister, because like sometimes she can like say something about memes.
Yeah,
I just don't know.
Yeah, the loop. You want to take that one, or?
Yeah. So I appreciate you sharing your story. It was I thank you for that. I think what you bring up kind of. I'll give you a direct answer to your question after, but I think what your point brings up is that this is a collective effort, right? If only one person is off of these platforms, they can feel naturally disconnected from the people in their class and things like that. So this is definitely something that, for example, if your entire class was completely off of social media, you'd feel a lot less disconnected from the things that are going on because you'd all be on the same page. Literally and figuratively. The second one is in terms of like the actual screen time. I don't think it's most effective to measure your use in time, right? So if anyone here who uses anything like Facebook, TikTok, it takes like just a couple minutes to go through an entire cycle of human emotion. But you can be like, oh, I was on it for 5 minutes, but you like saw so many things in that 5 minutes because of the way the platform is designed. So I really wouldn't measure it necessarily in time. I'd focus more on things like, is the actual platform designed for you to lose track of time? Like make those kinds of more specific decisions about the nature of the design of the technology. And I understand it's a more complicated way of going about it, but anything that resembles more of like the old internet, as we were sort of vaguely familiar, like the pages, like there's like pages on it. It's like static. You can't like scroll infinitely to the end. There's not a lot of like, if you see a lot of different things going on the page and it's really stimulating, it's probably not built with the intention of giving you the agency to use it as you like. But to be honest, I think if I were in your place and receiving this information, I think I still would have thought about like finding other ways to interact with people outside of even any of these technologies in general. I think as I've like also gotten more offline myself, I've just naturally like put myself in more social situations so that I regularly see people, so that I don't have to keep thinking about like what are ways for me to stay connected. It just because of the regular routine I go through in my day makes it that I'm physically near people, so that I don't, so that I'm not having to like fight to be connected with people when I got offline. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I'll go over our last question. I hate being the timekeeper, but I have to.
Okay, thank you. I'm Ari. I'm from Washington High School. And I think one thing I've been seeing a lot recently with technology is they've been removing a lot of like the physical UI. Like your phone doesn't have like a home button anymore, or like your car has like a touch screen instead of all the knobs and switches. And I guess my question is like, how do you think that impacts how we interact with social media, and like why do you think these companies have been pushing that?
It's a really good question. Who wants to take it?
I mean, I'm thinking about it, and it's like I don't have an answer, because it's like I get mad when I get into a newer car and it's like it doesn't have doorknobs anymore, or like I have to touch the screen, or you know what I mean? Like, and I think that there is definitely like an intention behind that. And I think it kind of, you can relate it to like, you know, the infinite scroll, where it's like, you know, it's there to kind of like make it feel easier. Like the idea, I think, is to like make it a little simpler, simplify it for you so you can do more stuff quicker, or you can, you know, you can take in more information at like a quicker rate. But I'd have to do like some more thinking on that. That's a really good question, because it's like, it is like, they're kind of just forcing it on us like across the board, if you really think about it, whether it's like even in your home, you know what I mean? Like, you know, you got smart refrigerators, or you know, I'm always arguing with my mom because she like bought like smart light bulbs. So it's like, I can't go to her home and turn on a light without having an app on my phone, which I think is insane. Yeah. Like, I think it's so wild to, you know what I mean? So, but I'd have to do more digging on like the impact on like what that's doing to me besides making me mad.
I think that doing more digging is probably a great place to end on, because I do have a little bit more. So thank you guys. We've already given them a little round. Let's give another quick round of applause. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Sure.